So you're welcome. Good day, everyone. This is History of Biology Education, and we're starting this history by looking at science. We have various definitions and descriptions that are given to science, but this descriptions and definitions, they may look different, but they have the same meaning. The first one I have here is simply says science is the study of natural world through observations and experiments. That is, science is about observing the natural world and carrying out experiments. The second one I have here says science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following a systematic methodology based on evidence. So this one explains that science is about pursuing knowledge about or the knowledge to understand the natural and the social world in a methodological way based on the evidences that are seen. Then you also have, or you can also describe science as a systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical world and natural world through observation, experimentation, and testing of theories against the evidence obtained. You will see that when you look at these examples of descriptions or definitions of science given, observations are very important there. Experiments are also mentioned, and as well, uh, organization, methodology, process, systematic way. So, which means that science is usually done in a systematic way. It has method, not just anything could be referred to as science. So now let's look at science education. We have to look at science education because we're going to biology education, but the history of biology education actually stems from the history of science education. So, what do we mean by science education? Science education simply referred or could simply be referred to as the teaching and learning of science to students or learners of all ages. It could also be literally, defined as the teaching and learning of science to school children of all ages, that is, of school children, college students, or adults that are even within the general public. So that means that when teaching and learning of science takes place at any level, it is described as science education. Science education is also described as the process of teaching students about science, and this includes scientific knowledge, scientific skills, scientific thinking, and as well as the nature of science. Science education also refers to the process of equipping students with fundamental scientific skills. When you try or when students are being equipped with fundamental scientific skills, fostering of curiosity and positive attitude towards science, and as well enable them to understand the world, the natural world, then and make informed decisions. This is also referred to as a science education. Science education, that is science education as a field, actually includes science content, that is the content of science itself, the content, what is to be taught itself, the science process, that is the scientific method, as well as the teaching pedagogy. As you move on, you will understand what we mean by pedagogy. Pedagogy is actually, as you move on in your program, pedagogy is actually the science of teaching. That is the way by which teaching is being carried out. Teaching is not just being carried out by anybody. Teaching is not about talking. It's a science. It's a way. There's a way that it is being done. So teaching pedagogy is what we refer to as, the way by which teaching is being carried out. Now, let's look at the importance of science education. Science education aims to help learners understand the natural world, make decisions, and engage with science and technology in the society. So science education, when students or learners learn science education, they'll be able to understand the natural world and make decisions, and as well they'll be able to engage in science and technology within the society. Science education is also important in order to help learners to develop critical thinking skills. What do we mean by critical thinking skills? This is what will be referred to by a layman as a deep thinking, that is thinking that is analytical, thinking that is evaluative. And it also helps learners to develop or to understand the world around them. Helps them to understand the world around them, helps them to understand the natural world and their place in it, that is their place in the natural world. It's also, science also helps learners to understand the impact of human activities on this earth. That is impact. Most of our activities have negative impact, and why we are having problems is that most people are not science oriented, so they don't understand that their activities or most of the activities they carry out are having negative influence or impact on the earth. So when the knowledge of science is there through science education, it helps individuals to understand the impact of human activities on the planet. It also helps to understand clear and effective communication. It will help you to understand clear and effective communication. It will also help you to be able to make clear and effective communication. Science education helps learners to develop scientific thinking and a positive attitude towards science. You will develop a positive attitude with an understanding of a science. One will be able to develop positive attitude towards science. Somebody that has acquired scientific knowledge will not say that science, or will not think that science is an abstract, and will not believe that yes, oh, this one is not possible, or this one is abstract, or is what have you. Once it has a basic evidence and understanding. Science also teaches learners problem-solving skills, and they'll be able to make informed decisions. You know, science is about investigation. Science is about finding out why. So in the process of identifying problems and trying to provide solutions to problems, a science or learning science will help to develop that skill, that is the skill of solving problems. Science is also important, or science education is also important for the development of new technology. So we have so many new technologies around us. They are all as a result of the knowledge of science. So, and the knowledge of science comes by science education, and this also helps to solve most practical problems. Now, let's look at the evolution and history of science education. When you talk about evolution and of science education, we're trying to talk about how science education come into place, come into being. And when we talk about this, we are actually referring to how we come about science education. There's need to come about, or there's need to talk about science education, because biology, we're actually going to biology education, but biology education stems from science education. So we're starting here. We're going to look at brief history about science education. Roger Bacon was the first to start and lay emphasis on the value of experiments and inductive inquiry. What Roger Bacon did was, he was the first person to start anything about experiments. And science is about experiment. So he started experiments, and he was the first one to start something about experiment as well as inductive inquiry. We also have Comenius that lay emphasis on importance of teaching with objects and pictures. You teach with objects, you teach with pictures. This is Colenus that has come with that. And teaching or laying emphasis on objects and pictures shows the importance of learning science, because science is about observation, science is about experiment. So Francis Bacon now brought this experiment, brought to notice this, teaching with experiments, that is, now brought to notice experiments to the whole world. That is, he's the one that brought experiments to the whole world, and he started teaching of science through inductive thinking. What this meant is that he taught through experiments, and now from the experiment he also taught what we refer to as inductive thinking. What do we mean by inductive thinking? Inductive thinking actually means that you get a thought through induction. That is, when experiments are carried out, you now make an observation, and from the observation you now make a generalized statement or statements. Now we also have Galileo Galilei, we have Williams Harvey, and Andres Fasalos, who also taught science and makes significant growth in science education. But all this happened before 17th century. But during 17th century, we now had various scientific academics being established. When we mean scientific academics, that is where learning of science started or took place. Now, in 18th century, we had into industrial revolution. That is, industrial revolution started. With industrial revolution, or the beginning of industrial revolution, science was brought closer and closer to people, brought closer to common men or common man. What do we mean by industrial revolution, or how do we mean by industrial revolution? When we talk about industrial revolution, what we're saying in this sense is that with industrial revolution, when people begin to see certain things coming out from the industry, which they now understand science better, or it gives them more awareness about science. Now, in 1827, University of London was opened. That is, University of London was established, and natural science was also taught there. Godzilli, John Tidal, and Faraday, they also helped in the spread of science education during this period. In 1849, science gained a place in the school curriculum when it was introduced for the first time at Rugby School of England. In 1916, the British government introduced natural science into their education system. That is, into the education system throughout. Natural science was introduced, and we now have science. Also in US, before the 1800s, that is before 1801, 1802, before that, the existence of science education was in an unstructured manner. That is, we don't really have what we can really say that yes, science education was like this. But industrial revolution also brought partial introduction of science. So in 1892, science education became expanded with laboratory work. That is, science education was supported with laboratory work, and it now became compulsory for students to learn. So many things happened thereafter. At a time it was considered that yes, the laboratory work is no longer economical. That is, they believe that yes, the financial aspect, so many equipment, so many instruments, so many reagents have to be bought, even the building of laboratories. So at a time they stopped it and they started teaching, and they were teaching science in abstract, but later they had to return to it. So in 1950, National Science Foundation was established in America, and this was basically to promote scientific research and education. So in the 20th century, which is the age of rapid propagation of science education all over the world, so we now have, in the 20th century, we now have science being moved from one place to the other, from one country to the other, and now we have wide or global rapid propagation of science education. Now, as science education was being propagated from one country to the other globally, it got propagated to our country, Nigeria too. So we want to look at history of science education in Nigeria. Science education or the teaching of science in Nigeria started during the period of Christian missionaries who introduced Western education in Nigeria. You see, the Western education was introduced in Nigeria by the Christian missionaries when they came to Nigeria. But they did not start the teaching of science immediately. In 1859, some schools were established. These schools include Christian Church Missionary Society of Nigeria, popularly referred to as CMS, the Roman Catholic Missionary, normally referred to as RCM, the African Mission of South Baptist Convention, as usually referred to as Baptist Seminary. Then we have the Wesleyan Methodist Mission and maybe the Presbyterian Church of Scotland. So these schools were established in 1859. Now, the foundation of science education were created and injected into this school's curriculum. But when they were introduced, I said that when the missionaries came, they did not introduce science into our schools immediately. Why? Because when the missionaries came, they came in other languages that are different from the Nigerian language. In Nigeria, though we have our lingua franca, which is English, we have more than 200 different languages. So there was need for them to be able to understand us. So they had to give us their language, which is English. So their main focus then was to train people on how to be able to speak the language, be able to communicate with them. They actually never thought of science education. But later, when these schools were introduced, when the secondary schools were established, we have the foundation of science education being created and injected into the schools. That is, injected into part of the school's curriculum, and they were injected in form of arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and physiology. So these are the rudiments or the foundation of science education that was introduced into the schools. Then later, the missionaries also established other schools that were also established, like grammar schools, teacher training schools, pastoral schools, vocational schools, agricultural schools. All these schools were introduced, and when these schools were introduced, you have also the introduction of rudiments of science into these schools. Examples of such schools that were introduced then were Oakwater Institute, which was established in 1861, St. Andrews College, Oyo, which was also established in 1876, and Wesley Training Institute, which was established in 1905. So we have fundamental foundations of science being introduced into the schools. So later we also have elementary science, which was introduced into the school curricula as nature study. The elementary science was introduced into school curricula later as nature study. This nature study is learning science through observations. So they learn science through observation. Now, between 1883 and 1930, there was the development of science in secondary education, that is in secondary school education by the colonial government. The colonial government, they also now introduce science education into, as secondary schools are being built, as they are being established, they were just introducing science. So there was rapid development during this time. So nature study was made compulsory at both the primary and the secondary school. But in 1920, at the secondary school level, general science was introduced. So we now have general science at the secondary school level, while we still have nature study at the primary school. In the year 1932, there was a major development in science curriculum, and this was the establishment of Yaba College, which was later upgraded to Yaba College of Technology. And this was actually to run courses like engineering, medicine, science, agriculture, survey, teacher training college, just to fill the vacancy in most of the relevant government the establishments or government developments. Later, we also have establishments of some other institutions, higher institutions, like for example, in 1948, we have the establishment of the premier university, the University of Ibadan, which was then called, University College, University College. So later we had the introduction of science into these ones, because the major purpose then for establishing Yaba College, which is now Yaba College of Technology, was to produce science, that is, was to produce teachers that can teach science in schools. In 1957, we had the establishment of a Science Teachers Association of Nigeria that stand mainly for the purpose or to revise science curriculum as part of the science education movement. So for now, we're going to stop there, and when we get to, we'll continue from there for history in history of biology education. Thank you.